Thank you again for being here today. I'm Whitney Zeigler. I'm the founder of Big Rocks Organizing. I'm also a certified professional organizer. We have a team of 9 of us at Big Rocks. We're all women, women-owned, and LGBTQIA-owned. And today we're going to talk about blending families and blending stuff, how to survive and thrive when merging households. So I do have a little slide presentation, but I welcome interaction and questions and comments throughout. I'd love for this to be interactive. Any questions right off the bat, or do we all want to dive in? Or maybe we could, actually we have a small group, we could go around and just really quick, if you'd like to, totally optional, but if you'd like to, why don't you introduce yourself? And if you have a specific question for me today, please let me know.
Well, I'm Diana Harrell. Hold on, I'll put my video on. Sorry. Oh my gosh, my mouse isn't working. I'm with Premier Property Group and like Oswego. Hi. And I'm just signed up. I thought it sounded like an interesting class. I'm excited for more.
Thanks for being here. It's great to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too.
I'm Sharon Zeigler, and I'm part of Big Rocks also. And so I just wanted to tune in to see what was new and different about blended families, which have been around for a long time.
Bill Cohen, Certified Senior Advisor. You can see the name of my business, Cohen Caregiving Support. And I'm not in a blended family. I think I'd like to unblend some stuff. But you know, I've been working on that, Whitney.
You know, yes.
So I'm Minda Seibert. On the Big Rocks organizing team. And while, I have the boys, but, as a sandwich generation of a caregiver to my parents, while they haven't moved in, there's still that blended family of, holiday gatherings and vacation times and different times where you do still blending stuff and blending traditions and having to put boundaries. And those conversations still happen, even if it's not a long-term arrangement.
Stacy, how about you? Do you feel comfortable introducing yourself? And if you have a specific question on today's topic, please let me know.
Stacy Stein with Tudor Barrett Connected Realty. I actually, yes, have a majorly blended family. My spouse is older, so I have some older stepchildren and some step grandchildren that frequently come to visit. And my mother just moved in with us. My 80-year-old mother just moved in with us last October. So yeah, it's quite fun and exciting. So, oh, and then we have the bird and the dogs and all, the other craziness in the life. So
Thanks.
I didn't have any specific questions, but yeah, I definitely like the topic, and I haven't seen you in a while, Whitney, and I was like excited that you had something going on. So
thanks for coming, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of great insights and experiences to share with us. So thanks for being here. Sue or Diane, would you like to introduce yourselves, and do you have a specific question about today's topic? Diane says sure. She's typing in the chat because her microphone doesn't seem to be working.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Hey, Sue.
Nothing specific to ask at this point, but when I was getting ready to join and I was trying to get dinner because it's 7 p.m. here in Pennsylvania, I was thinking, here I am hustling to get to this meeting, and I'm so disorganized that here I am hustling to get to it. So that means I need you.
Well, thank you. We're happy to be here for you. Glad that you made it, and please enjoy your dinner. Diane, did you want to add anything in the chat about yourself, or if you had a specific question for me today? We'll let her type here. Meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some slides that I prepared. But again, I really would love this to be interactive. Oh, here we go. Diane says, I've been getting back into dating and I'm in an age range where potential dates often have children. I have 2 children, 8 and 19, and have needed to bring a partner into a relationship where I have a child, but have not had to think about blending kids together. Okay. That is a very, very timely situation for our topic today. So we'll definitely get to talking about, the actual blending, Diane. And if you have specific questions as we go, just holler.
I'm in the same boat as Diane.
Okay. Blending kids?
Well, I have adult children, and I'm seeing someone who has adult kids about the same age. I have 2, he has 3.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of interesting because the last person I was with had 1. Sorry, I keep screwing around with my mute. So it was much simpler, but now there's so many more people involved, and I just don't really even know what to think. It's a lot.
Okay, I hope that I'll have some good tips to share with you today. And there is going to be a Q&A part at the end. So if you feel like we didn't cover something that you really want to hit on, please let me know. All right, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourselves and sharing why you're here today. Can everybody see this okay?
I can.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, I'm going to have to change my view. I've got to move our heads out of the way. Okay. I included this picture just because it was really sweet. Okay, so here's our roadmap for today, where we're headed. Just wanted to talk briefly about the prevalence, how to merge physical space, like the logistics of it, communication, ground rules, and boundaries, which are super important. Talk about support, and then have an open Q&A at the end.
And Diane asked if we're sending the slides out. And Diane, yes, the information that we're sharing along with the video and the blog will be shared as soon as I'm done editing. We're not promising for tomorrow, as soon as it's done edited.
Editing the video.
Yes.
Sometimes we cut little bits out here and there if needed. So yes, you will get a copy of these slides. So don't feel like you have to write everything down unless that's your learning style. And then by all means, please do. Okay. So how common are blended families? Well, in the States, it's really common. 1 in 5 households has multiple generations living in it. That's over 64 million Americans. That's 20% of us, at least in 2016. And I think it's only gone up since then, but we don't have any updated numbers for 2022. So, and this increased 34% just between 2000 and 2016. And again, I think it's continuing to go up. And for our realtor friends who are with us today, 41% of home buyers are looking for a home where they can either have adult children live with them or their aging parents. So I don't know if that's what you're seeing out there as well. Is that really common? Yeah, okay. Stacy?
Yeah, I think that's common. I think it's also common. I've been seeing a lot of more people wanting just to combine resources, and so like siblings wanting to move their families in together on a bigger property, and going through all of that because they have more buying power.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing that. And that's actually what we'll talk about next, are the motivations and what's behind these trends. So you mentioned wanting to combine resources and have more buying power when you're buying a home. Any other guesses about what's driving this trend?
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to think. I think, yeah, a lot of it is, the boomerang kids, right? So I think that has a lot to do with it. It's, they get out, they move on, maybe, they go to college and they don't, they don't get the job at the price, at the salary that they thought they were going to get with a college degree. So therefore, it's a lot easier just to kind of move back in with mom and dad and hang out with them and save money so that, they can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. They might also have student loans that they're needing to pay off. And we know that rents in the Portland metro area went up around 29% just in the last year, and housing prices have gone up a lot too. So yeah, a lot of reasons. Sue, I see your—
Hi, I'd say aging parents, which you already mentioned, and it seems like a lot of, quote, children, adult children are getting divorced.
I think the pandemic has definitely put stress on relationships. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but we've definitely seen a lot of our clients are going through major life transitions. I'm sure that Diana and Stacy, you're probably seeing that with your clients as well.
I also just read that 4 million workers are no longer in the workforce because of COVID, not because they were sick necessarily, but they quit during COVID or lost their jobs and haven't gone back into work yet. So that would indicate they're moving in with somebody in a lot of instances.
Right. Or they don't have childcare and they can't return to work, or maybe they're moving in with someone to help out with childcare. So yeah, there's myriad reasons. A lot of these are driven by economic or public health reasons. So we've got hyperinflation happening, the rising home and rental costs, gas prices going up. As you mentioned, Sue, we've got the pandemic-related job change or job loss. There's also been a lot of isolation and loneliness for many of us going through the pandemic. And if we have been living alone for the past 2 years and we haven't been able to see friends and family very much, this might really be a great motivator for us to want to cohabitate with other people and see other human beings every day in person, get hugs, actual hugs. So COVID's prevented us from visiting family, especially, family across the country that we need to get on a plane or train to go see. It's also given us an opportunity to re-examine what we really want out of life and to reprioritize and focus on what we call here our big rocks, what's most important to you. And a lot of people are craving flexible work and career options now, while at the same time being closer to our families. So those are just a handful of motivators. I'm sure there's so many more. So some reasons, some benefits to merging. Stacy, you mentioned combining economic resources. What else? What other ideas come to mind when you think about, okay, what are the pros of doing this?
I think we kind of mentioned it a little bit, just kind of helping each other out from day to day. It's easier, like in an instance where maybe you have an aging parent, and instead of going across town or spending 20 minutes in traffic to get to their house to help them with what they need every a couple times a week, it might be easier just to kind of relocate them in with you so that you don't have to, quote unquote, waste that time doing the drive back and forth. And then also other things are potential health issues, right, that they're encountering. So ensuring that somebody is more available for them to and accessible to them in case something happens. So it's not a 20-minute drive to get to them. It's something that you can get to a lot quicker. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. As we talked about, some of the benefits are sharing expenses. You could share chores, childcare, or elder care responsibilities. It also strengthens family bonds. Ideally, there can be some some patience required, some excellent communication skills, and great intention setting. So we'll talk about all of those things. Any other rewards that people want to throw out there? before we go on? So let's talk about the physical space and how we can physically merge households. We get this question a lot at Big Rocks. So here are some tips, and I would love to hear your tips too if you have some that you'd like to throw in here. So one is, if at all possible, start early. Last fall, my mother-in-law, who was 101 at the time, she's now 102, had emergency surgery. And with less than 24 hours notice, she moved in with my spouse and I. So we had zero time to plan, incredibly stressful, turned the whole household upside down, and was a very drastic change for all of us. Huge adjustment. Don't recommend this because it can put a lot of stress on your family and on your marriage and on your relationship. So you don't want to head to divorce court. So if you can, start as early as possible. One simple way to start is just by identifying duplicates. You know, how many spatulas do you have between your households? Do you really need 15 spatulas? Can you keep the best two? So those are some simple ways to get started. Get everyone involved, from the littlest of kids up to the adult kids, up to the grandparents. Have everyone start talking about it, participating. Have everyone go through their own stuff as they're best able to, or assist them with going through their things. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. And we call this right sizing, this process. Other people call it curating or editing. But you want to sort through your things and make space for this new vision, this new family that you're creating together. So you're making literally physical space for someone to either move in with you, or you're able to take less stuff with you into this new household, which leaves a lot more room for you as a combined family. Right sizing is a journey, not a destination. So it's perfectly normal to need to go through your things more than one time. Maybe you take an initial pass and you might struggle with certain items. Some things have more sentimental value to us than others, and that's perfectly natural. So you might need to go through. It might also depend on your energy level, your mood that day. Maybe one day you're having a harder time making decisions and you get a good night's sleep and you go back at it the next day when you're fresh and it's just easier and you're chugging right along through your things. One sticky point can be family heirlooms. Oftentimes our older generation might have items that they cherish and they want to pass them down to younger generations. And maybe the younger generation doesn't want those things, or maybe they don't understand, or they don't have that same connection, or they don't know the family history. So if these items are important to you, share with your family why. Share the family history, document it, write it down, record a video, something, because if this item truly is important and you decide to keep it as a family, just make sure people understand why it's important to you. Sometimes people might want to bring quite a few things with them. Maybe we have 3 sofas, but we only have room for 1 actual sofa. So in this case, have everybody pick a favorite item of furniture, for example, or a favorite whatever it might be. And then you'll incorporate those things together in that space. But just know that we all have to make some compromises and some sacrifices. And that can be tough, but kind of keep that greater good in the forefront of your mind at all times, and that'll help serve you as a guide. And then the cardinal rule, and the most important thing that I think you can take away today, if you don't remember anything else, please remember this. The cardinal rule is that we can only make decisions about our things. We don't get to make decisions about anyone else's things. So I'm not going to belittle anyone else's stuff. I'm not going to touch their stuff. I'm not going to condemn it or look down upon it. Just know that you want to treat someone with respect and compassion and really, really respect their decisions. And if somebody's feeling stuck, you might not be the best person to work with them. There can be a lot of contention when we all have skin in the game, so to speak. So sometimes it's nice to bring in a neutral third party, like a professional organizer, for example, or someone who doesn't have as much at stake and who can be a neutral party who respects everyone who's involved in the process. So, any questions about anything we've talked about so far, or do you want to add any insights or input?
Diane says, oh, a big question as to what to do about finances and merging romantic relationships. How do you blend families between objects and relationships, but dealing with financials and bill allocations is challenging. So maybe you're going to touch upon that later.
We'll talk a little bit about finances later, but it might be good to, if you have a financial advisor, Diane, to sit down with your advisor or to find one that is fee only, not commission based, but someone who you can purchase a few hours with them and they can advise you. And I think that will be a super worthwhile investment, because we know that money is one of the top things that families can fight about and have conflict about. And that's something that's really important, that everyone needs to be on the same page before you move in together. What's the plan? Who's paying for what? Are we all putting a certain percentage of our income into a household account and we're paying the mortgage or the rent and the bills out of that? Or, is it mom and dad are going to pay for groceries and utilities and the adult kids are paying the rent? You need to sit down and talk about and decide what feels fair for everyone who's involved. So I think it can be good to have, again, that professional, neutral third party who is there to help guide you and can give you some systems. How do you track your expenses? How often do you meet as a family to talk about money? And do you set a family budget? Things like that. So I hope that helps a little bit. I think we could do a whole nother presentation on merging finances for sure. Any other questions or comments so far?
She also mentions with blending objects, she discovered that there can be conflict or difficulty dealing with spatial restrictions, and nobody else was willing to reduce their things, so that she felt she had to keep limiting what she kept in order to make space.
Yeah, that's a tough situation, and that might feel unfair. I mean, we don't want you to end up feeling resentful because you're the only one letting go of things. So sometimes when we hit this roadblock, we will suggest to our clients to use a storage unit if that's financially feasible. And then for the folks, who are not willing to let go of those things, then they need to pay to store them. Ideally, this would be a temporary solution, though. We don't really ever advocate for people to use storage as a long-term solution, but it can be good in the short term. And I think too, once people get some distance from those items, like if they've been in storage for 6 months, for example, then it's a lot easier when we haven't seen them or needed them in that amount of time to kind of go back later and go through again and right size again and let things go. And then two, we do have some clients who either have brain-based conditions or who may or may not have hoarding disorder. And that's kind of a whole different topic that we could, again, do another separate presentation on, but that also might be a good place to bring in a professional as well.
Yeah, because for some people, everything brings joy. So that's
right.
Not a good question to ask.
Yeah, or we have a hard time determining what's important. We feel like we need everything. We need to hold on to it just in case. Yeah, and generations have different values around that. We have the Great Depression generation, right, as we know, my mother-in-law's generation, but then too, my spouse is older than I am. And so being a boomer, being raised by that generation, having different motivators or values that we've been raised with, or maybe we're very environmentally conscious and we have a hard time letting go of something if it needs to go to the landfill and there's no safe way to recycle it, for example. So there can be a lot of roadblocks when we're right sizing. But again, if you get stuck, we're happy to help. So some other things to think about are, if at all possible, having some generational spaces. So each generation gets their own space in the home. So let's say, Stacy, I'm going to take you, for example, maybe your mom has her own bedroom and bathroom. You and your husband have your bedroom and bathroom. And then, maybe you share the kitchen, the garage, the common living areas. But if people can have their own bedroom and bathroom, like we don't have 16 people sharing a bathroom, if at all possible, that can definitely make things a lot smoother. And it gives people a safe haven to go back to and recharge their batteries when they need that time. So maybe the grandparents need just a little bit of time away from the kids if we've got small kids in the house or a lot of noise going on, or vice versa. The kids need a safe place where they can just let loose and be as noisy as they want to be too. Something else to think about are different tastes. We all have different aesthetic tastes, and sometimes they don't blend very well or very naturally. So again, asking people to choose their favorite items and then incorporating those, you might have a kind of an eclectic decorating style as a result. Or you can divvy up the rooms, and let's say Stacy's going to decorate the living room and Diana's in charge of the bedroom, and the kids get to decorate their own rooms and like that. Or who uses that space the most? Like if grandpa's doing all the cooking, grandpa gets to organize the kitchen. That just makes sense, right? Or if grandma's into gardening, have grandma organize the tools in the garage or the gardening shed that she uses. Also, things to think about are what purpose is this space serving and who's going to use it? Can we create zones of activity within the space? Because if we have just open space that doesn't have a purpose and it doesn't have a zone, it tends to be a black hole and a clutter magnet. It's kind of that dumping ground, or like from Harry Potter, that room of requirement concept where everything just gets stuffed in there. So really think intentionally as a family, how do we want to use this space? And you can use you can have different zones within the same room. Like maybe there's a kids play area, or maybe there's a reading area or TV watching area or a crafting area, for example. So again, just think about intention. How do I want to use this space? Separation tools. So if you have a smaller space, or sometimes just having a visual or an audio separation can be good. So sometimes pocket doors can be installed, or even a curtain on a tension rod, just so you kind of have that visual barrier there and you're able to separate different spaces, especially if, maybe you've got multiple siblings sharing a room. Even just a curtain around their bed just might make them feel like they have this little cave or little safe place. We recently helped a woman with an 8-year-old son, and the closet was his space. Like that was his safe space where he would go in with his flashlight and read his books in there. And that was his little cozy nook. So there's a lot of different things you can do. Barn doors don't take up much space. Fair split and rotation. So when you're thinking about divvying up storage space, especially, so closets, drawers in the kitchen, space in the refrigerator, if you can, give everybody a designated space. So you've got your space for your special items in the fridge. You've got your kitchen cabinets and drawers. You've got your bathroom drawers. Bathrooms are very contentious and often limited with storage space. And then, closet space. And if people's items exceed that space, then they need to figure out something where maybe they're rotating out their wardrobe seasonally, or maybe they need to put things in storage and rotate them out. Rotation, here I'm thinking more of artwork and decor and display items. So maybe there's not enough room on the walls for everybody to be able to hang their favorite art, but maybe every 3 or 4 months, you change it, like a museum. You have a new exhibit where maybe this month is Sharon's month to choose how we're going to decorate, and 4 months later it's Diana's turn to choose the decor. And 2, if you have your own bedrooms, especially with kids' rooms, as long as the room is not dangerous or harmful in any way, let them decorate the space how they would like, even if you want to pull your hair out at this bright orange wall or whatever it is they decide they want to put in their room. It's their safe space, and it's temporary. So I see we have some more in the chat. Minda, is there anything to?
Well, there's a possibility on the, the merging of items. If I can understand Sue's idea, is I place my vase here. Okay, Charlie, you get to place one thing. John, you get to place one thing. Meg, you get to place one thing. And then, until it's kind of decorated. She was getting that from when someone died, siblings took turns choosing what they wanted to keep. So in a sense, you could have that if you're merging households, people could choose what they were going to add to the shared space, if I understood that.
That's a great idea. Yeah. You can even draw numbers to see what order people are going to go in. You could get fancy. Something to think about too that I should add to the pre-merge slide is space planning. So it doesn't have to be fancy. You can even just use graph paper or blank paper, but figure out, especially the major pieces of furniture, maybe the major artwork, what's going to go where, and make sure that you're not bringing too much and that the space is still safe for everyone in the household to navigate, especially if you have folks who are using walkers or wheelchairs or whatever it might be. Thinking too, not only about the aesthetics of a space, but the audio. How noisy is a space? Are you going to have dedicated quiet zones in the house? Dedicated noisy zones where people can just let loose and play video games or watch TV, or maybe people are required to wear headphones or noise canceling devices when they're listening to things so that they don't disturb others in the house. Now, there's a lot of different options, but I think it's always good to think that through before you merge households. I think a lot of people are familiar with the term psychological safety, as far as creating a safe space where people can express themselves and share what's on their mind and not feel like they're going to be attacked. There's something called neurological safety. And this really comes into play for those of us who identify as being neurodiverse or neurodivergent. So this might be our folks with ADHD, maybe highly sensitive folks, traumatic brain injury, anxiety, depression. There are a lot of different brain-based conditions that can impact our neurological processing. So for example, yeah, Bill, go ahead.
Oh, you're on the track I was going anyway with dementia, since it's my area, is that when you're talking about activities, things to keep them engaged and busy so they're not bored, anxious, etc., is create a space which is conducive to doing that so they're not distracted and they can concentrate and breaking it down one thing at a time and keeping it simple, like folding towels or sorting stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Something to think about too is visual stimulation and auditory stimulation. So we all have different hypo and hyper sensitivities. So for example, for me, when I look at this picture here, there's too much visual stimulation in this picture. I feel uncomfortable with this space. There's too much going on. Whereas for someone else who is hyposensitive visually, maybe there's not enough stimulation going on and they need that, maybe that bright orange wall or whatever it might be. They might need that to really feel awake and alive and like they're in their comfort zone. So think about things like that and err on the side of designing the space to the most sensitive person and their needs, especially if they're the one who's using that space the most. Does that make sense? I went to a presentation last night about highly sensitive people, which that describes me, and it falls under that neurodivergent spectrum. But something that I'm really sensitive to, for example, is noise. But I think when it comes to visual clutter, a lot of us don't really understand how that might impact others. So she gave this analogy of like, pick your least favorite music, let's say rap or country or, hip hop, whatever it might be. And then imagine getting a boombox and putting it next to your loved one's ear and turning it on full blast. Like that's what the visual clutter feels like to them. It feels like they're being assaulted. And I think people don't really understand that, but that analogy really put things into context for me. Any other thoughts about neurological safety or anything that we've talked about on this part? Okay.
I think that, I think of group facilitation, and there's, having comfort agreements of what makes people comfortable to speak out in a group. And, I was thinking that neurological safety and kind of, I find in relationships, sometimes when you bring things up at the very beginning, like, I don't do your laundry, then you're good. Because if you start doing laundry after a couple of years, then saying, I never really wanted to do your laundry, it's kind of too late. And yeah, kind of having examples of, before you start with these kind of things, and for you to be able to verbalize, like, look, I kind of need to have things cleared off at the beginning, makes it less personal. Unfortunately, we get sensitive.
We do. And I think you bring up a really good point. We need to take responsibility for communicating our needs and having that, I like that term, comfort agreement, having that up front. Like, who is doing the laundry? If we're each doing our own laundry, is there a laundry schedule? When can I use the machines? All these different things to think about. Who's cooking? Who's doing the grocery shopping?
Yeah, like a checklist sort of thing of kind of like, okay, how and how many dishes can be on that counter before someone needs to tackle it.
Yeah, are dishes allowed to be left in the sink overnight? All these different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that after this next slide. Something to think about as a family is creating a command hub. So there's an example in the picture here, and it doesn't have to look like this. This is just one example, but having a hub in the busiest room of your house, most often this is the kitchen, but it's just a central point of communication where you can leave each other notes, where maybe you've got a shared family calendar, you've got your family to-do list, different things like that. It might be, there could be an electronic version if everyone in your household is tech savvy and feels comfortable using it. It could be an electronic calendar, for example. But just when you're talking about technology, again, kind of working with the folks who are maybe the least tech savvy and bringing the command hub to that level. And things in your house too, like, for example, if you have a smart home or if you have a Ring doorbell, does everyone in your household know how to use these things? Can we write out instructions? Can we create a video? What is their learning style, and how can we best adapt so that everyone feels like they can participate equally? Create a family meeting space. Maybe it's the dining room table, maybe it's the living room, but create a comfortable space where you can come together and, as Minda said, have your comfort agreement, have regular family meetings where you can discuss issues. Loose papers, this can be a sticky point for families. So we recommend having an accordion file, and each member of and it could be near your command hub, but each member of the family would have their own slot in that file, and you put loose papers in there, or you put their mail in there, and then they're responsible for checking it and they can find their papers. If you have important documents, I would highly recommend scanning them and sharing them with people in the household. Like, maybe you just used Google, which is free, or there's different apps like Evernote, things like that, but make sure that people have access to, if you have an advance directive, like, let us know what your medical wishes are, right? Let us know emergency contact information, maybe copies of birth certificates, divorce decrees, anything that's important to keep a copy of and that other people might need access to. Make sure you have that in a place that people can access when needed. And then safety, just, are there tripping hazards in the home? Do we need to get rid of the throw rugs for grandma and grandpa to keep them safe? What about cords? What about lighting? Do we have enough lighting to read by for older eyes? Smells, think about smells. Some of us are very sensitive in that area. So yeah, there's a lot of different things to think about as a family, but I think if you get all on the same page, it's just going to be a much smoother process rather than the process that I experienced with my mother-in-law. So any other thoughts here about family communications and having this command hub, for example? I see some comments in the chat, Minda, but I can't see them at the moment. So if there's any.
Well, we were talking about the Sue had a suggestion on different color dishes for each person to assign responsibility.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Like with, sorry, I'll go back here. With Big Rocks, we have a team calendar and each person has a different color on the calendar. So you could have, you know, each person in the family has a color, whether it's on the calendar or the dishes. We'll talk to you about like having a basket. Each member of the family has a catch-all basket. So if you're going around the house and people have left their items out, you have permission to put their loose items in that basket, and then they know where to go to find them. And you don't have to deal with people leaving their stuff out, which might drive you crazy. Or if you inadvertently leave things around, you might drive you crazy if people move your things and you don't know where they went. Well, now you know they're in the basket.
Yep. And specific people with colored towels too is another suggestion.
Yeah, colored towels. Nice. So here, we'll switch over here now. I guess we'll continue talking about communication and ground rules and boundaries. And again, really important if you can to start these early and to be really clear about them and when you're creating that comfort agreement. Again, compromise is key. We're not all gonna get what we want, but we want to keep the greater good in mind and our why, our motivation in mind. You know, what's our ultimate goal? Is it to spend more time together as a family, to be there for each other? You know, just keep that positive goal in mind. Self-care is going to be really huge when you merge households. You need to be a role model and really model that self-care for yourself so that your parents and children and others living in your household can give themselves permission to practice self-care too. And don't feel like self-care is selfish by any means. It's essential. It's like breathing air or drinking water. Because if you're not taking good care of yourself, you're just not going to have a lot of fuel. And when you're communicating with other folks, you might be, you know, not so even tempered as you would like to be. Money, chores, and guests. We talked a little bit about money, but want to just be really crystal clear about who's paying for what and how you're going to be handling money and blending money as a family. Chores to get everybody involved. You know, everyone from almost the littlest kids on up can do something around the house to help out and base it off of their strengths. You know, what are they good at? What do they like to do? You can also rotate chores. If nobody likes to do something, you can have your chore chart at your family command center hub. Pet care. Guests. How often are guests coming over? What are your COVID safety protocols? Again, I think adjusting to the most sensitive person in the household. So if you've got someone who's extremely vulnerable or someone who's really uncomfortable having guests come into the home, talk about all of that. You know, where are guests going to stay? How long will they stay? Who is responsible for their meals, cleaning up after them, et cetera, et cetera. And do we have any veto power if we don't want a certain guest to come back, or how often people can come over? There's also childcare, elder care, and pet care. Talking about all those things so that obviously we don't want any of those things to slip through the cracks, but we also don't want it to fall all on one person and then they end up feeling exhausted and resentful. You know, grandma and grandpa have a life too. They're not always available for free babysitting, for example. Want to make sure that Fido gets fed. Attitude, hugely important. Keeping a positive attitude front and center for sure. Regular family meetings. You know, maybe you have a weekly family meeting. Might be on a weekend or a day that everybody has off. Maybe you have dinner together and you talk about issues directly and you tackle them promptly. And it might be uncomfortable, but you might have to say, you know, that perfume you use, I'm really sensitive to it. Can you, you know, or can you keep the surfaces more clear? Or, you know, something you said the other day really hurt. Because especially if we have adult children, our parents moving in with us, we might have old patterns come back up from when we were teenagers. Maybe we had these ongoing discussions or arguments, and sometimes we can easily fall back into those roles, or maybe our parents don't see us as adults, they still treat us as children. So having all of those conversations and really kind of nipping it in the bud from the get-go is important. And boundaries are also important. Knowing what your boundaries are, setting them in advance, as Minda said about, hey, I'm not going to do your laundry from the get-go. Everybody does their own, for example. Just in communicating those clearly. And then if folks forget about our boundary, or they cross our boundary or make us feel uncomfortable, again, bringing that up at the family meeting or in a safe space one-on-one. Having compassion is hugely important. I know when my mother-in-law moved in with us, it wasn't her first choice either. It was a huge loss of independence for her, and recovering from surgery and suddenly needing help with toileting, for example, when you've been independent for over 100 years, it's really humbling. And so we need to remember to put ourselves in other people's shoes and have compassion for what they're going through or what their abilities are. Humor is a great tool to use in merging households. We talked about the baskets, like one for each family member for their lost and found items. We talked about surfaces and clutter. Some families will have a use it or lose it rule. So if you haven't used it in 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, a year, whatever you want to say, then maybe it doesn't need to be taking up space in the shared family household anymore. What items do we truly use? Which items do we truly honor? And then have a timeline for when you're moving in together, and maybe consider doing an experiment beforehand. So maybe you rent something for an extended period of time, or you go on a vacation together and you do a test run before you actually pull the trigger and sell your house and merge. Any other ground rules or ideas that you want to share? Any questions about any of this stuff? Do we have anything in the chat, Minda? I saw that we're got a few things.
Diane shares, I had my kids pick out their own cup, plate, and bowl, and then had only the number of dishes out per person and put the extras in the closet. That made them have to take care of the dishes more often and identify who left the dishes out.
Yeah, when you each have your own color or your own thing, there's nowhere to hide. So yeah. And it is true. How many times have you gone on vacation and maybe there's 4 bowls and 4 forks, and yeah, you've got to wash them every meal. You can't let things stack up because there are no extra or extraneous items to accumulate. So that's a great strategy, Diane. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, she said she did bring more out for guests.
Oh, well, that was nice of you. That's good. Let's talk about some support here. So ask for help when you need it. Don't feel ashamed to ask for help. It's easy to get overwhelmed, especially when you first are merging households and sharing your space and your routines are changing, and maybe they're changing in ways you didn't really anticipate. Even if you've talked about this really well with your family, you've created this space plan, you've got your comfort agreement in place. But yeah, it's never an issue to ask for help. Something to think about too is to leverage outside help. So some ideas might be using a dog walker or a professional house cleaning service, using an interior designer to try to blend your varied tastes, working with a professional organizer to go through and right size with you and to assist loved ones who maybe have a brain-based condition or are neurodivergent, or maybe just have a hard time letting go of things. And you're not all on the same page about that. What other services can you think of that people could leverage for outsourcing? Or maybe you've leveraged?
you might need to have some before school and after school care for your younger children.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, maybe transportation, having that lined up for older adults or even kids in your home. There's even a service that will come pick up dog poop in your yard if that's a chore that nobody wants to do and you have a little bit of extra funds and you're tired of fighting over it. You can hire a poop picker-upper. There's meal service delivery. There's all kinds of different things. Yard maintenance, a daily money manager who can help you with, paying the daily bills and with finances. Sending your laundry out can be a great gift to yourself. Having some respite for caregivers so they can do what they need to do to take care of themselves and recharge their batteries. There are also certified aging in place specialists who can come out to your home and do an evaluation and see how safe it is for aging parents, and they can make some recommendations for products and things to help make it safer. You can even have a personal trainer come, and everyone in your household who wants to work with them, like they'll bring the music, they bring the equipment, and your whole family can participate. Any other ideas for outside help? Okay. We talked about too, a storage unit can be a great temporary tool. And then mental health, just don't be afraid to leverage mental health assistance and reach out to a therapist or a counselor, because this is it's a huge life adjustment. And I think it's great to have support as individuals and then have support as a couple and as a family, especially if people are, maybe they're going through a major health crisis or a big life transition. Don't be afraid to leverage that help to help you with that transition. And then we have a blog where we listed some resources. And so there's a link here to that you can check out later.
Yeah, Whitney, I was going to also say, obviously mental health, seeking out the appropriate professionals for that, but also maybe just to ensure that you have somebody that you can talk to about what's going on and feel comfortable that they'll keep your confidence and be able to say things to them that you might not be able to say to anybody else. So that is also a good source of support for you, for anyone in this situation. So
absolutely, thank you for that, Stacy. And I'm sorry, I feel like I have talked too long here. We don't have that much longer. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We will share these slides with you. Does anybody have any questions or anything that you want to talk about in relation to this?
I also know that just a sounding board, going off of what Stacy said, sometimes you need to talk to someone and just, because things do get under your skin, and then you just kind of wonder how reasonable you are. And you talk about the role reversals and, the old patterns, and just kind of like, well, if I approach it this way or say it this way, how would the other person take it? And sometimes hear, having someone else hear it, you can kind of adjust either the tone or the way it's phrased, or, using I statements instead of you, or starting it with I feel instead of, and trying to use that. But it's tough, especially, either adult children, either you don't want to become the parent again, but I know caregiving my mom, she resented and didn't really like that I was having to take over, but I had to. And, there's so many dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think having someone to talk to and be that mirror for you and be able to reflect back and listen is huge. Yeah. Stacy, I'm curious, with your mother moving in with you since last October, are there any other things that you have learned that you'd like to share with us today?
Yeah, I think I needed to learn how to be more patient. That was a big thing, because it reminded me, because my mom, she actually, after my dad passed, my mom came to live with us for about 13 years. and then she went and lived with another one of my brothers when we moved out of the country, and then we came back, and it's just recently that she's come back to live with us. But what I needed to remember was to be a little bit more patient, to check myself when I was sounding like the parent, and not treating her with respect to her position as an equal person to me in the household. And I think unfortunately that happens sometimes when you're the quote unquote caregiver. You feel like you get this overwhelming motherly instinct that it's like, okay, this is the way it has to be, right? Whereas, and then you learn, especially reflecting back on your children as they're growing up, you learn how to transition to talking to them as if they're a 14-year-old versus talking to them as a 30-year-old, right? There's a huge difference in the way that you approach that conversation and that relationship. So I just had to become more patient and aware of when a comment that I was saying could potentially be perceived as me, not in the way that I intended it to be. So that's been the main thing for me. And I'm doing a lot better than I did when she lived with us a long time ago. So
So you've learned along the way.
I've learned along the way, yes. And I think we've come into like a really nice balance. The other challenge I think for me was just remembering, hey, no matter what, I need to make sure that when she's concerned, her or my husband, sometimes I accompany my husband to his doctor's appointments as well. I just need to make sure that I'm making space and not stressing myself out over the balance of what now is in my life. So yeah, that's been fun and exciting too. Some days are better than others, but yeah, in general, we've been able to ebb and flow with it. So
yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you everyone for being here today. We're at time, but if you want to reach out to us by email or on our social media, please feel free to connect if you have any other questions or thoughts you want to share about today. Again, thank you for being here, and we're happy to help you blend your family if you'd like our help. We're Big Rocks Organizing. Thank you.